Hey, what is up, folks, and welcome to yet another session on this channel. If it's your first time watching, my name is Malik, and I decided to start recording and explaining the knowledge that I have gathered over the years because I spend all of my time in front of the charts. So, I might as well help others while spending my time in front of the computer, right? So, in this video, I will be explaining why your fair value gaps may not work as intended. Maybe you've seen a lot of other traders use fair value gaps as their entry model, and it seems to work out perfectly for them every time they put on a trade. But so when you put on a trade, the market just rushes through your fair value gap and stops you out, right? And there can be multiple factors to this, and unluck is, of course, one of them, but it is definitely not the greatest factor of them all. There are certainly things you can do to make your fair value gaps higher probability. You're never going to get them to 100% probability, but you can definitely get them up to 80-90%. And I'm going to be explaining those things in this very video. So at first, just quickly explaining what a fair value gap is, just to make sure that we're on the same page. Fair value gaps are basically just imbalances or inefficiencies in the marketplace, and they are one of the things that the market algorithm is drawn to, meaning that the market rarely leaves a fair value gap unfilled. The market tends to gravitate back towards the fair value gaps before continuing in the same direction as the initial impulsive move, right? And on the screen, you can see how a fair value gap would look on the market. So let's jump into some examples, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about fair value gaps and how to make them higher probability. Okay, here we are on the charts. So firstly, I want you to look at these two fair value gaps that I picked out, and then I want you to tell me which one of these is a valid fair value gap and which one is an invalid one, and then I'll explain why. So firstly, I want you to think about this and tell me if this fair value gap is a valid setup or entry model. You tell me. Okay, and then I want you to tell me if this one is a valid fair value gap or an invalid one. Okay, so if we look at the first one, maybe this will help you out a bit, but the first one out of the two is the valid fair value gap, and I'll explain why. So as you can see right here, it's all about knowing where price is most likely going to draw to next and then trading in that direction, right? So we have just swept buy side liquidity, right? And showed displacement to the downside, okay? And so we have this swing low here and this swing low here, relative equal lows, right? Sell side liquidity, which is probably where the market is more likely to draw to next. So for that sole reason, this is the valid setup out of the two, right? And as you can see right here, we just filled sell side liquidity. We have these relative equal lows here, and they were all rated or swept, right? So you probably don't want to take a bearish fair value gap and go short off of that after we just rated sell side liquidity, right? You would want to wait for a bullish one to form after this and then take it long to eliminate the buy side liquidity that is unfilled, okay? So I want you to understand that valid fair value gaps are just all about knowing the drawn liquidity, right? You always want to have an idea of where the price wants to go and where it's more likely going to go, and then you want to trade in that direction. Where people mess up is when they trade in the opposite direction of the actual draw because they haven't analyzed it properly, or they just don't know what a draw on liquidity is, right? So they trade against it. So had you taken this fair value gap, I promise you would have gotten stopped out. And had you taken this fair value gap, I promise it would have went well. Okay. So another example here. Would you say this is a valid fair value gap or would you not? Like, would you personally long this fair value gap right here? Yes, right? You would want to long this fair value gap. And now, would you want to long this fair value gap right here? If price retraces down back into this imbalance, would you want to long that one? Probably not, right? Because we just filled the sell side liquidity and now we have these relative equal lows down here. Or we just filled buy side liquidity and now we have the relative equal lows down here. Or a bunch of sell side liquidity unfilled that needs to get filled, right? So our draw after we swept the buy side is going to be bearish, right? The draw on liquidity is probably down here. So we want to look for shorts. So you don't want to go long on this imbalance right here because we have just swept the buy side liquidity, right? And as you can see, that fair value gap, which I told you was a valid fair value gap because we have swept the sell side and now we have the buy side up here, buy side here, buy side here, right? That fair value gap obviously turned out great, right? That was the good fair value gap, the valid fair value gap out of the two I just showed you. And it's all just because of the draw on liquidity. We are trading in the direction that we want, right? We expect bullish prices, so we only look for longs. We don't look for shorts after this, especially when price fails to displace further down below after, sweeping sell side. When we start to chop up after a sell side sweep, then that's a pretty good indication that the draw is probably going to be higher then. And since we had a market structure shift happen right here, we left behind this fair value gap. That is an extremely valid fair value gap. And what validates it even more is that we have a clear place to place our stop, right here on this swing low right here. So that is also something you want to take into account, is that if you have a clear stop and a clear take profit, if you don't, then don't trade it, right? And that was the bullish one that I showed you that obviously failed because we had swept buy side liquidity. So you don't want to go long on the bullish fair value gap after a sell side sweep or buy side sweep, sorry. And so we swept buy side, we went straight to sell side. So after this sweep, you would want to look for a short opportunity, which could have been this fair value gap right here, right? That gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities to get in before hitting these targeted sell side liquidity, right? And one question I get a lot is that what do you do if there's multiple fair value gaps, right? So in this case, we have 1, 2, and 3 fair value gaps. So how do you know which one to take? And so if you have no idea, first of all, I want to make it very clear that if you have multiple fair value gaps and you are unsure which one to take, just don't take the trade, right? But one thing you could do is that you could pull out your premium discount Fibonacci and then look for the fair value gaps that are inside discount, right? If you want to go long, and premium if you want to go short. So out of the 3 fair value gaps, we only have 1 inside a discount, right? We have 1 that's below the 50%, which makes this fair value gap the discount fair value gap out of the 3. These up here are in premium. This is in discount. So you wait for price to hit this one, and if it doesn't hit this one, then you just don't trade it, right? So what would have happened? We displaced completely through the 2 first ones, and then we consolidated a bit in the 3rd one, but ultimately we went higher after that, right? And we never closed below the 3rd one, so that's perfect. That's how you tell if a fair value gap is getting respected or not. Are we closing inside or outside the fair value gap? So that's a key thing to note. If there's multiple fair value gaps, either you don't trade it or you trade the fair value gap that's in discount, okay? And then we have one more. Another way to find valid fair value gap setups is through price delivery. Where are we delivering from, right? This is a 15-minute fair value gap. And as you can see, we never closed below it. So this is a clear indication that this fair value gap is getting respected. So we would jump on the lower time frame. And as you can see, we found a fair value gap right here. And the reason why this is a valid fair value gap is because of price delivery, right? We're delivering from a higher time frame PD array. So we are respecting this bullish PD array, indicating that we are probably going to be respecting this bullish PD array as well, right? So to sum it up, you must find your draw on liquidity and then trade fair value gaps that are based in that direction. So if you have a bearish bias, you only trade bearish fair value gaps. And if you are confused when there's multiple fair value gaps, you find the fair value gap that fits your discount premium Fibonacci. So if you want to go long, you find the fair value gap that's in premium. And if you want to go short, you find the fair value gap that's in discount. And if price shoots off without hitting the premium or discount fair value gap, then you just don't trade it. Right? A lot of people make the mistake of just going short in a bullish market or in a bullish draw on liquidity, right? Or go bearish when the draw is lower, or go short, when the draw is higher. And they don't take price delivery into consideration. For example, right here, right? We are delivering from a bullish PD array, a higher time frame bullish PD array. So when we get a lower time frame bullish PD array, that is probably going to be valid, right? There's a very high probability of that being valid, especially if your draw is higher as well. So a higher, let's say you wanted to go long, right? You wanted to look for longs. If you have a higher draw on liquidity and you are delivering from a bullish PD array, then the odds of the lower time frame fair value gap working out is very, very high. Okay. So it's just all about price delivery and getting the right draw on liquidity and trading within that direction. And that's where I see a lot of people mess up, right? They don't have a clear bias. They trade against the obvious draw on liquidity. They don't take price delivery into consideration. They just trade fair value gaps on their own and expect them to work, which is just unrealistic. It's not going to work. So you're going to need all of this in order for your fair value gaps to succeed and have a much higher win rate. And it's actually fairly simple once you actually look into it, right? So find your draw on liquidity and look for price delivery, and then find your fair value gap. Don't just look for it. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that this video made it a little bit more clear on what fair value gaps to use and which ones not to use. I try to make these videos as short as possible to not waste any of your time and any of my time, of course. And yeah, a fair value gap is a perfectly optimal entry model within the right conditions, right? Not within the wrong conditions. Then they are completely useless. So you must understand the draw on liquidity and price delivery. And I promise you will see magnificent changes in terms of your fair value gap and how they are getting respected. Because right now, if you're watching this video, your fair value gaps are probably not working. And that is because you're doing one of the things that I just told you wrong. Either you are not taking price delivery into consideration. If you are delivering from a bearish fair value gap, you probably don't want to go long on a bullish fair value gap. And if you have a bearish draw on liquidity, you probably don't want to take a bullish fair value gap. And that is where people mess up. So I hope you enjoyed. And until I see you in the next video, I hope that you will be safe. And don't forget to give me a thumbs up and leave a comment on what you want me to do differently so that I can improve. I'm still new to all this content creation. So if you have any suggestions, leave them down below, and I will see you in the next one.